of the biggest objections to cloud and cloud services for years has been the security of the cloud. And Microsoft have essentially bet everything on cloud. You know, mobile and cloud first is the direction that they're going, but they aren't really spearheading a revolution in IT computing. They're part of the absolute titanic change in movement towards the cloud. Lots of people who I hear say, "Oh, we're not going to the cloud." You say, "But do you not have ServiceNow and Salesforce, and do you not have a whole bunch of cloud-based apps?" And so, uh, the cloud has kind of creeped into your environment. But the point I'm trying to make is that Microsoft have gone for this cloud first strategy in which everything is going to be cloud first. And the biggest hurdle to that for most of the C-suite was security. So what did they do? Well, they went and bought a bunch of companies and invested a ton of money that really only a company like Microsoft could do. And with this, with the new acquisitions and new money and cloud infrastructure, they've been able to build a suite of products that is second to none. That is absolutely second to none in terms of understanding and protecting users' identity. And the reason why they're focusing on users' identity is because more than 60% of data breaches last year were user identity driven. And you'll hear all the time that Microsoft talk about identity being the new control panel. Well, you know, why are they focusing on it? Well, because lots of people are already focused on firewalls. They're already focused on network security. They're already focused on a lot of stuff around the periphery. But Microsoft own authentication. More than 90% of companies throughout the world log on through Active Directory. And so it was pretty obvious that they had this huge advantage and this huge pillar or stake in the ground in the directory service. And so they said, let's take this directory, which was built, the protocols and everything that was built for Active Directory came into being in Windows 2000. So the development started on that in 95, 96, 97, 98. It's pretty old. It's really pretty old technology. And what they came up with the idea was, well, let's take Active Directory and replicate this to Azure Active Directory. And so we've our directory service in the cloud. Okay, so now I've usernames and passwords in the cloud. Is that not even more insecure? And so Microsoft said, well, we have these huge cloud services. They've more than 200 cloud services. And when I talk about cloud services, I'm talking about, Office 365. I'm talking about Bing. I'm talking about Xbox Live, Windows Update. Services that have a scale and a magnitude that almost nobody else on earth has this level of magnitude. And within this environment, they say, well, okay, hang on. Why don't we take telemetry and information from these billions of points throughout the earth that we're able to monitor, that we've connections to, and why don't we use big data to collect that data? Why don't we send signals into, why don't we call this a graph? Why don't we take signals from different points throughout the world and start to build a graph? And when we say take signals, well, what kind of signals? 1 billion devices update every month through Windows Update. Azure Active Directory processes 300 billion logins every month. So throughout the world, 300 billion times people are putting in a username and password, and big data is able to work out where they are, what's normal for them, what's their location, and it's able to build this and collect this information. There are 200 billion emails being scanned through Office 365 every day. 200 billion. And there's 18 billion web pages that Bing has scanned and analyzed and worked out, are they safe? And so I'm just giving you some numbers from some of their services. But then if you try and imagine, what does this look like? Well, Microsoft have a cloud management suite, the operations management suite, and they have agents on thousands and thousands of our devices throughout the world. And so these devices are bringing back telemetry to Microsoft. And the kind of telemetry they're bringing back is that I have network analytics. I'm monitoring the IIS logs on my servers, and they can see from the logs, hey, a botnet has been infected on your machine. Your machine's been infected with botnet, and what's happening? It's connecting with several IP addresses. And we now can see that those IP addresses are malicious. We take that signal and we bring it back into the graph. We take me, Paul, as a user, and I'm trying to log into Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and it says, oh, this authentication is coming from the Seychelles. When has Paul last been in the Seychelles? Well, never. And I pull that information in, and the IP address that he's coming from, oh wow, that's actually, we have that now tagged as a hot IP address because we've seen that IP address trying to communicate and log into thousands of Azure AD or Office 365 or Bing services, and we can profile that and we can say, you know what, that isn't a safe IP address, and that signal gets fired into the graph. And so this graph starts to build, it starts to grow, and Microsoft end up developing a level of security and intelligence that's basically only the biggest providers in the world could build this information. And what can they do with this security graph? Well, if I start to monitor a server and the server's communicating, a web server on the web, well, suddenly I can work out that the IP addresses that are communicating with, they're known nefarious IP addresses. And we can get information on that and telemetry on that. And if you were to take something like, a mail that has come in, and I'm scanning billions of emails, and I see that that email has come in and it has an attachment, and I can work out that the attachment is malware, well, then I can send that information across the whole of Office 365, across millions and millions of mailboxes, and I can look for file signatures and I can pull them out. And I can basically cover you in this absolute web of protection. And the web of protection, like what's feeding it and what's building it, well, that's pretty simple. That's the more of us that use Microsoft Cloud Services, the bigger the mesh grows, the bigger the graph grows, the more signals come in, the more information that Microsoft can take, and they can make sense of that information and use that and machine learning to apply security to us.